Right, click the links, join the channel here and or on subscribe. So thanks for the very recent generous support. I know a channel this small, I know it gets a lot more support than a channel this size probably deserves. So way to say now in shilling. So don't give any more money. You've given enough. So this kind of reminds me of I remember Tristan at Nerdaz Newsstand, who I really like her quite a bit actually, but I just disagree with her on all her takes on everything probably. But hey, knock yourself out. And also, I think like some of the back and forth between the two tribes was kind of it was a little bit petty, and I think some of it is a lot of the stuff is like when you see the money involved in live streams and what do they call it, blood sports. That's why they do it, because there's so much money when they do those kind of live streams, and you can make a video. And like at that point, if I protagonist and antagonist, you can just team up onto the table and be like, why don't we do this blood sports, and we'll pull the take and we'll just split it. It's like you're providing entertainment for people. I get that's why they do it, but whatever. But it kind of feels like when she was talking about comic book sales, like she's a huge DC fan. I was always more of Marvel. I think Marvel's like for like dumber comic book fans, which is probably not something I should have said aloud. But I was a Marvel fan because I thought it was simpler, or it wasn't not dumber, but like DC seemed darker to me when I was a kid. But that was kind of the Batman theme they were going for, and I do love the '80s 1980s Batman quite a bit. So where's I going with this? Oh, so the back and forth were she was talking about like comic book sales where she thought they were doing really good, and then she was going back and forth with a bunch of different people on it. And I watched a few minutes of that, and that was all literally just a few minutes. I didn't need to see them going back and forth because, one, they didn't have really the numbers in front of them. If you don't have objective truth, what's the point of it? The other thing was I've read the comic books, so I don't need to see people's theories on whether the numbers are good or bad, because I know they're probably almost certainly have to be bad because I read them. They're horrible. The mainstream comics, when I first started making YouTube videos, I didn't believe Zach when he was talking about how bad comics were, and then I read them myself, like modern stuff. I read them myself. I go, oh, they're even worse than he's saying. He's dialing it back so he can stay on YouTube because it's too hot of a topic. The stuff they're doing, like the hateful stuff, and like if I stayed doing that on YouTube, I would have been in trouble. I probably would have been kicked off of YouTube because it's to talk about it invites too much. It's just not what YouTube wants on their platform to talk about this kind of stuff. It's kind of hard to explain on the YouTube platform. Like, what they want and what they don't want. And they don't want people talking about anything real on the platform, which is why nobody on YouTube does, which it sucks because it's the biggest platform. But anyway, when I heard them doing that, like Tristan was doing back and forth with Comicsgate stuff, I hope people were giving her a cut of the take. But I didn't need to see the debate because I read the source material. It sucks. There's no way it's selling good. And if you tell me it's selling good, it's like you're telling me that Lada is outselling Ford. 1968 Ladas were better than Ford. And it's like, well, no, there are horrible cars. So this kind of feels something similar to this. Amazon's silence on Rings of Power. The silence is deafening. So Rings of Power is hiding the numbers. First of all, the short answer is yes. So I guess you can tune out now. Amazon is probably hiding the numbers, and the show underperformed, and they spent quite a bit of money for it. The rights alone were $250 million. So you'd think you'd turn that into something. Like, you think you'd stay close to the artist's original vision. You'd think wrong. You and me both, who were both in that same boat of like, I think you'd want to get a return on your investment and give the fans something that they can really enjoy. Just like Peter Jackson's, oh no, we're not going to do any of that. Oh, okay, that's kind of weird. But you're cultural Marxists. That's what you're doing. And then suddenly it's the missing piece. Once you kind of understand that, you just kind of apply that they live filter over everything. You're like, oh, this is cultural Marxism. This is why they're doing this stuff, even if it is costing them money. And keep in mind, Amazon, as I get the tabs open looking for computers to get this Black Friday, I'm going to be live streaming, is like a distribution company, an automation company, and a tech company, amazing tech company in like robotics, artificial intelligence. But they're not an artistic, artsy-fartsy type of company. And this isn't their property. They didn't start it from the ground up. They're just they're a tech company and a cultural Marxist company. And they have this property, and it's like when people win the lottery, but they don't know what to do with the money, and they just like within a year it's all gone because they didn't get the money slowly, which is usually the best way to get money. So yeah, they're probably hiding the numbers. And the thing is, when the show finally comes, the numbers actually come out. Whenever they come out, um, nobody's going to care about it. It's like, who cares about Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan? Nobody. I mean, people watch it, but it's kind of like the people who are already subbed to Amazon for the Prime service already watch it, but it's not getting new subs. Since season 2 for Rings of Power is probably like 2 years away, that is a long time. But I can promise you, they say they're gonna improve it. They said that kind of, they couched it in careful language, but they're not going to improve it. It's going to suck. They couldn't improve it because to improve it, you'd have to fire the actors and replace the actors. You'd have to fire the writing. It's too much. It's just like it's too. You'd have to replace. You'd have to not be Amazon to improve it. So Amazon claims that they got good watch time, which is great, and they probably did. I'm sure they did. Which the funny thing is I forgot I had Amazon. Somebody gave me the passwords to it. I think I was watching it on the other online sites, and I forgot that I actually had Amazon. So when I was watching it, my watch time wasn't contributing to Amazon. So I mean, I don't have Amazon. Somebody gave me the thing, and the thing is, I think they're cracking down on that too. So they said the show got good watch time, but that's secondary, because it's the net sub gain or loss that's the issue for Amazon. So I watched it, but the thing is, even if I didn't, I could tell you the vibe based on social media buzz. There was none. There was nothing positive. There were a handful of negative YouTube reviews like this and all the other big channels who are Thoris Unlimited and Nerdroticals, kind of people laughing at it. But just based on the lack of positive buzz, I knew the show was in trouble. People have to talk about a show. It's the new digital water cooler. Then I watched the show myself, and it was garbage. And I know people on, like, a lot of stuff on YouTube is, capitalized headline type of clickbaity stuff, and people reuse the same phrase because if it gets audience retention, so this is hot garbage. This is a flaming pile of trash. You know how many times you hear that on YouTube? It's just, or like looking at Tim Pool headlines. It's just it's all so tiresome. Thing is, I know that this is part of a culture war with a lot of these kind of shows. Get woke, go broke, and which is not always true, but it's more true. It's more true than not. But it's not. It's also like going broke. They're not. That's not a negative for them. They're willing to spend money to push, because they're not. They're publicly traded companies. Yes, but they're not. I don't know what their articles of incorporation is. They're not following their dogma, because these are cultural Marxist companies. And like, how many times do I have to say that by now? I mean, if you've been kind of like, by now, I think there's a lot of people who are kind of finally waking up to like huge companies behaving strangely, and you have to assign a motive to something. It's what are the, not Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle? Who's that guy who wrote the detective book? It's like you exclude everything else. They're not trying to make money. They're not about making money. If you were about making money, wouldn't you you'd look at Peter Jackson's films, like all 9 hours of those things, or more, even more. You'd watch them over a long weekend. You'd take careful notes. You'd watch them with a bunch of people, and you would rewatch them. You take notes. You would get those films in your head, the vibe of those films, how they made you feel, and you go like, we're going to do this with the money we have allotted to us. And we've got better technology now, 20 years later. They didn't do that. This isn't Lord of the Rings. So the thing is, I know that this is an aspect of the culture war. Like, when I started paying attention, it was in 2015 with Disney Star Wars. One group says one thing, the other group says the other thing. The difference between this is that both sides said it sucked. It didn't get good reviews, and the Wheel of Time thing also got crappy reviews. But before Rings of Power came out, they were looking at Wheel of Time. They're going like, yeah, this is kind of a placeholder. It's not very good. We know it's not very good. Everyone's kind of waiting for Rings of Power, and then Rings of Power came out. And you're like, oh, you got two shows that are not very good, which is weird because they both look like they've spent quite a bit of money. I don't know what Wheel of Time's spent, but Rings of Power is very expensive. So people initially tuned in because of the name, Lord of the Rings. Is it the best fantasy name recognition on Earth? Yeah, it's got to be up there. Like, at least in the past 100 years, and other stuff before that. But yeah, Lord of the Rings, that's way up there. And after the thing came out, like, people tuned in, but then it was kind of cringe watching, and people wanted to see, was it going to turn around? And then you watched all 9 episodes, you realized, oh no, this is just weird. This is really weird. but nobody paid for it because the true Lord of the Rings fans knew that it was going to be woke propaganda. It's like why what's that, Matrix Part 4 came out? Like that movie tanked because everyone who's into the Matrix is online. And they know the directors are kind of going through some Trump derangement syndrome type, or the director. And then they, who was the guy? Morpheus? If I forget the guy's name, the guy, they always wore sunglasses, but they all wore sunglasses. So you go like, oh, so you're doing this reboot, but you don't have Morpheus in the show. You got Neo, Trinity, I think, and then the main guy, the guy whose hand is holding out the pills. Like, you got a problem with Morpheus? Did he do something to the director behind the scenes? He has some kind of creative differences. It's like he expressed interest in being in the show, and you didn't put him in Part 4. That's a little weird. So the people who were aware of Matrix Part 4, they knew ahead of time it was going to be crap, and it was crap, and it was, I mean, most people just never watched it. I don't know how much money it lost, but quite a bit. And the thing is, that's weird, is like the money people who were pulling the strings on that, they knew it was. They knew it was going to bomb. The thing is, they know a lot of this stuff is going to bomb, but apparently they're just printing money. So what was who was the audience for this show, Rings of Power? It didn't have Lord of the Rings fans, and it wasn't like a Black Identity show. Like occasionally they'll get like a built-in audience for that, and it wasn't for the vaguely kind of fantasy D&D crowd who, Renaissance kind of fair crowd, because it didn't have the ring of authenticity, and it wasn't for like a young romantic crowd, glittering vampires. We've got like 20-year-olds who are good looking, attractive young people who are involved in romance. It's like it didn't appeal to any of those sub-genre audiences. It was an action adventure fantasy with a feminist protagonist, which is a problem because the initial audience was mostly male for Lord of the Rings of the books. And I mean, if you're listening to this, you're like, I'm a female and I'm listening to this. Yeah, but I think that's kind of like it's self-selecting bias going on there. I won't say I don't know that. No, I take that. Should I take that back? I don't know if it was mostly a male audience now that I say that aloud. Was Lord of the Rings mostly male? It had to have been. I realized I just kind of assumed that without having any data to back that up. So I don't know. I'm just assuming it's mostly a male audience. At least the movies, not the books, because there's like one main chick in the movie. If they made it, I was gonna say if they made it now, they put romance in it, but they do make it now, and they just made it crap. Thing is, plus it's a show for chicks and soy boys, but the girl is really unlikable, and I don't like. She's too old for the role. She's like, she should be a mother with daughter or children already. She's not the young romantic interest. She just doesn't fit in any, like, you can't wrap your head around her. Why exactly I know she's an elf and they live thousands of years, but like in the back of your mind, I think you probably should have gone for a 20-year-old actor. I think it would have made more sense. The romance would have kind of, I don't know, like everything just felt off about it. So who is the audience for this show? Curious people who had already paid for Amazon. Like there's no way that people are subbing to Amazon just for this. But the point of the shows are to keep retain subs or get new subs. I don't think you got any. I don't think this had a big effect on it one way or the other. And this thing cost $500 million plus. That I think it costs like $700+ million. They can lose that, and it's not going to hurt Amazon. That's how much Amazon, especially after there's whole conspiracy theories there. After the recent events, Amazon has done very well for themselves. So if they go at the end of this comes out like 5 years ago, yeah, that event that cost us $400 million. It's like they won't even notice it. The thing is, they got to hide the audience numbers because they're probably pretty bad. So why was the show bad? Because they called it Lord of the Rings, but they made it Marxist propaganda. It's not Lord of the Rings. They lied. Lord of the Rings is a European story based on European mythology. People are tired of cultural Marxism. We love European people. We love their stories. That's what created the audience base in the first place. Like all these type of stories are all created, and you take something you like and then you change it and destroy it. If you want to change Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Wheel of Time or any of these, even She-Hulk, then you don't love the original story. This story is European. We don't need to change that. If you want to make a story of non-Europeans, then write your own story. It's not that hard. This is textbook Frankfurt School cultural Marxism. There are no non-Europeans in the story. That's just anti-white Marxist propaganda. GTFO. Just write your own. If you want to write a fantasy story, how hard is it to write a derivative fantasy story and make it look as whatever diverse as you want? This is people being culture vultures. It's an endless battle between globalist parasites who want to burn the world and nationalists who are looking for a bigger helicopter. Inshallah. So, Amazon or Disney, they have money to burn. They're in a different position than some other companies, and I'm familiar with them. The Amazon's got its own money to burn from shipping, right? Disney has money to burn, I believe, from earlier IPs that are just going to continue to be a cash cow. So they're both uniquely poised to make cultural Marxist propaganda for the next 10 years, even if it's a money loss. And there's probably ways they can finagle the taxes around that, and even hide money some ways. But like, even if it's literally just an open and out, like, oh yeah, every year we do these propaganda movies and we lose $3 billion every year or whatever. It's like they look at it and they go, yeah, but the net, what's the net? Oh, we're net profitable because of all these other things that are coming through. That's what it means when I say they're making propaganda. And in the back of my mind, thinking, don't the Securities and Exchange Commission, shouldn't someone be looking into this? Because aren't you defrauding the shareholders? I mean, it's a whole different issue, but it's like if you're expecting the corrupt government to police this issue. So much has to remain unsaid. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks to the recent very, very overly generous support from Vegan, Frog, Ireland, Wargoose, and everyone else who's supported on the various platforms. And I will see you guys on the next episode.